I was attending the university in a nice small town in California. I lived just a couple blocks away from campus. It was about a 10-minute walk, so I never bothered trying to find parking and just walked. I had a math class that ran from 6 to 9 at night, on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I generally have no issues walking home, even in the dark. I'm 6'3", around 200 pounds. I have a big red beard, and I believe people are usually more afraid of me than I am of them. I should note that I'm a total pansy, and were anyone to ever attack me, I'd probably end up in the fetal position crying. About a week before this particular night, the school sent out an email to all students. There had been several instances of girls being stalked and, in a couple cases, attacked or taken by a group of 3 to 4 men in a black car. They warned us to walk in groups and not stay out late. The attacks were all after dark. I remember reading the email and feeling horrible for the girls who had been attacked. But I also didn't pay it much attention as I didn't quite fit in the attackers' criteria. While people had been able to count the number of assailants and describe the car, nobody ever got a license plate number. It was a very cold Thursday night. I'd worn my large hooded jacket to keep warm on the walk. We had a test that day, which meant we'd have to leave class early. Our teacher would usually spend about 20 minutes going over stuff, then give us the test. After we finished and turned it in, we were allowed to leave. So instead of all 30 or so people leaving class at once, we were all spread out in our departures. I was probably the 10th or so person to finish the test, and I started on my walk back home. I threw on my big jacket and put the hood up. I love this jacket because it's incredibly warm and makes me look more bear-like. One of the people who finished the test before me was this fairly petite girl. We had sat next to each other several times, but I'm pretty socially awkward and had never spoken to her. She was walking about 30 yards ahead of me, and it was around 8 p.m. and dark out. She was staring at her phone as she walked along. We'd been walking for a couple minutes when I started noticing something that made me feel a bit off. There weren't streetlights along this stretch of road, so it was pretty dark. I could have sworn I saw something moving in the street, but I wasn't sure. I began to pay closer attention, and after a few seconds, I realized there was a car moving slowly behind this girl. It was a black car, and they didn't have their lights on. It was almost impossible to see them. I immediately recall the email I received the previous week about the attacks. Small girl, alone at night, black car. Holy shit. I sped up to start catching up with her. The car pulled closer as well. I called out to the girl. She stopped and turned around to look at me. As she turned, the car doors opened. I grabbed my phone and turned on my flashlight app. 3 men jumped out of the car and started running at her. I started yelling at them, and she started running away from me. They were about to catch her, and I was sprinting at them. I'm 100% sure 3 dudes would absolutely kick my ass. I'm sure 1 dude would. I had no idea what was going to happen if I caught up to them in time. I started shouting everything I could think of at them. I deepened my voice to sound more intimidating. I puffed up my bear jacket to look as big as I could. I remember that nobody had been able to get the plate numbers, so I shined my light in the car. I started shouting out license plate info at them. This freaked out the attackers. Two of them ran back to the car. One guy turned to me and looked like he was going to come at me. But one of the guys in the car told him not to. I was too big. They flipped their lights on and sped off. I reached out to the girl to make sure she was okay. I shined my light on her to make sure she hadn't been caught or anything by these men. She was crying and shaking. At this point, a couple other people had finished their test and had seen the last of the encounter. Another guy from the class and I walked the girl to her dorm. She even made us walk her to her door on the 3rd floor, even though access to the building required a card. We called the police and told them about the encounter. I had memorized the plate number of the car, as I shouted to the guys a couple times. A month or so later, they found the car. Inside were some knives, duct tape, mace, and rope. They caught 2 of the guys outright and were trying to get them to out the others involved. Every Tuesday and Thursday, even after the police caught the guys, I would walk the girl to her dorm after class and then head home. It was one of the scariest moments of my life. I thought for a while that I was going to either watch this girl get kidnapped or be brutally murdered stopping it. Stupid, rapey, kidnappy meanie guys. Let's not meet. In my childhood neighborhood, my neighborhood's pool was larger than the other surrounding neighborhoods, so people often visited ours instead. When I was 8, I went to the pool with my sisters on one of the first days of summer, as I always did. When the lifeguards kicked all the kids out for adult swim, I sat down in the pool chair next to my sisters. This guy, between 11 and 13, laid down on the chair next to me and said, "You're beautiful, will you go out with me?" My sisters thought it was funny and teased me about it, so I just kind of laughed. But it made me uncomfortable. I was really shy back then, so I wrapped my body up in the towel I brought to cover my body, which he was staring at very openly. He introduced himself as Chris and kept trying to talk to me, and I was too shy to tell him to go away, so I let him keep the conversation going, even though it made me uncomfortable. I soon forget about it, until I went to the pool next time. There he was, telling me how pretty I was, petting my hair, asking me to go out with him, and introducing me to his disabled grandmother, who brought him to the pool. Anyway, one day this girl came up to me and asked me if Chris was bothering me. I lied and said I really didn't care, and she rolled her eyes and joked about how he used to ask her out too, and that she was glad he'd found someone else to pine over. The girl, Elizabeth, started hanging out with me when I went to the pool, which was almost every day since I was allowed to go by myself if I wanted. She explained that she and Chris were good friends from a different neighborhood, but came to our pool because it was bigger and had more room for his grandmother to work on her physical therapy for her legs. We became great friends and laughed about how Chris was always following us around and asking me out. One day I noticed that Chris followed me all the way back to my house and tried to hide behind a mailbox when I turned around. As funny as that sounds, I didn't think it was funny back then and rushed back into my house. I began to notice that he was getting more aggressive and annoyed with me for refusing to date him. He started asking me to go on walks with him through the park and brought his grandmother so I didn't feel like I could say no. He would take me into the woods or behind the jungle gym, out of sight from his grandmother, and make creepy comments about my body and touch my cheek while telling me how pretty I was. He'd pet my hair and try to bounce the curls, like stretching out a spring and watching it curl up again. His grandmother would offer to let me sit on her lap during these walks while she controlled her chair, which made me really uncomfortable because I didn't know her well, and being a stupid, ignorant 8-year-old, I thought her atrophied legs were a little gross. He continued to follow me home, even when I took a shortcut through the woods or the long way that led in circles. His presence began to make me nervous because I wasn't sure what would happen if I continued to turn him down. I started avoiding the pool when his grandmother's handicap van was there, but I'm pretty sure he just fixed that by showing up later than usual, so I'd already be there when he arrived. All of my friends, including Elizabeth, thought it was funny, so I never told them I didn't want to go to the pool anymore, and I never brought it up to my sisters or parents. So if someone asked me to go with them, I'd just go and hope he wasn't there. Finally, during the last week the pool was open, I went to the bathroom. The bathrooms are a bit off to the side of the pool and closed off with a large heavy metal door so kids don't sneak in and vandalize it at night. The second I entered, the door shut behind me and the lights turned off. Then I heard Chris say, "I'm not letting you out until you agree to go out with me." And he locked the door. The bathroom was cold and pitch black, and I was terrified of the dark at the time. The tile was that disgusting, slimy, wet feeling that tile gets when it's wet, with bits of dirt and sand on it, which is why I never liked going in there in the first place. It also smelled like chlorine, and a typical subpar public restroom. Stuff of nightmares for an 8-year-old. I started banging on the door and screaming for help, but nobody could hear me because of the really heavy door and the location. But then some angry soccer mom started screaming at me to stop pranking her and how much trouble I was in. Turns out that she'd been locked in there too, and was mad that while she was peeing, the lights turned off. She called for help with her phone, and I was eventually let out of the bathroom. Being 8, I didn't think about it much, but I now realize how creepy the whole situation was. I should have told someone the first time he followed me home, and it never occurred to me to just stop going to the pool. The lifeguard stopped allowing people from other neighborhoods due to an unrelated series of break-ins, and I'd heard that he was banned from the pool for locking me and the mom in the bathroom. But the next summer, I saw a boy who looked just like Chris, but taller, and with blonde streaks dyed into his hair. Might have been his brother, or a spot-on look-alike. But I never went to the pool again after that. And I never met Chris or Elizabeth again. Up until first grade, I lived down a cul-de-sac. The road was shaped like a lollipop, and my best friend lived right where the stick meets the lolly, if you will. She was a couple years older than me, the youngest of 4, and was the only girl. Naturally, her older brothers taught me everything I know, years too soon. We would tag along with them as much as it would let us. One day we followed her youngest brother to the Blues store, down the main road our street was off of. It was not a very far walk, maybe about a quarter of a mile stretch. Being the early 90s, 3 kids under 10 walking a few blocks to the convenience store was not unheard of. I must have been about 5 or 6. Maddie was 8, and Joe 9 or 10. I remember he got Andy Capp's fries, like always, and we were about halfway to our street when we all whipped around to the sound of loud car engines behind us. Honestly, I think I was too young to fully process what was happening. Remembering it now feels very lucid, if that makes sense. Seconds after noticing the cars were coming up quick, and we were on the sidewalk, Joe screamed, "Run!" And the 3 of us booked it to our street, down the straight road and into their house. Here's the thing. All the cars were the same car. Nice sports cars. Sorry, I don't know cars. But I know they were new. And they were each a different color. One was red, one was black, and one was yellow. Same car, different colors. Shiny paint, and very much in unison. They revved their engines as they drove behind us, not coming up next to us or cutting us off like they could have. We were young. How fast could we really have been running? We got to the house, slammed the door behind us, and went to the front windows. We watched those 3 cars circle the block several times before driving away. I don't know why we ran. I just remember that feeling of panic. Joe must have felt the same feeling, having told us to run. We were followed, so the feeling was correct. Again, I don't think I could fully process it. I was just doing what I normally did, mimic my friend, who mimicked her brother. I do know, however, that Joe was scared, even after they left. I don't know who they were. I don't know why they would chase 3 kids. I also don't know why they didn't come back, knowing what house we ran into. Maybe they were older kids who were trying to scare us. Obviously, let's not meet. I wouldn't even be writing this story here if I didn't think I saw them again. But I think I have seen them again. About a year ago now, Route 1 on Saugus, Mass. About an hour from my childhood town. I saw a situation going down with 4 vehicles. It was late at night, after midnight. My boyfriend and I were always taking long drives, but I can't remember the specific reason we were there that night. Anyways, we came out of a 7-Eleven and got in my car. We looked ahead and saw 3 trucks circling another random car. I should explain how Route 1 looks. Basically, it's one of those annoying roads that you never U-turn on. You know, it's 3 lanes across. You have to take the right and cross the street at a light in order to loop over and merge into the opposite direction. It's also lined with plazas, retailers, grocery stores, a mall, etc. on both sides. For the most part, the parking lots connect somehow at the back of the buildings, like where the 18-wheelers go to drop off stuff, so that you wouldn't have to get back on Route 1 to go over to a plaza or 2. Right, so we see this going down. I was right in front of one of those tiny buildings with a bank ATM. so they weren't hidden or far back off the road. Immediately, I was shocked to see what looked like a high school fight about to go down. 3 bully trucks on one random car. Let's call it a Corolla. I mean, they were all the same truck. 3 of the same truck in 3 different colors. 3 nice, souped-up, shiny painted trucks in unison. One was black, one red, and one yellow. They all had their big spotlights shining on the brownish Corolla from the rack bar. I had to look that up. But I couldn't hear anything if they were talking, and nobody got out of the car. After half a minute, the Corolla quickly reversed from them and sped away, towards the back of the 7-Eleven and around to an entrance to Route 1. Right away, all 3 trucks did the same thing at the same time. They all shut off their headlights and followed the car. My mouth was on the ground. Yes, it was the most exciting thing I'd seen all day. So yes, I followed them to see more. I just could not believe that this was happening. It didn't make any sense. They called a lot of attention to themselves already, being that there were 3 huge trucks of the exact same make, model, and accessories. Then they all shut their headlights off and race after the little car? How would they not be afraid to get tagged? There are a lot of cops on Route 1, and it was late. I only followed for a minute or 2 due to my boyfriend reminding me of how bad an idea it was to continue. Once they got on Route 1, they looped over to the other side. I saw them behind the plazas on the other side though, headlights off, following one another, clearly looking for the Corolla. I didn't call the cops because I really didn't know what was happening. What would I have said? I didn't even really think about all this until the other day when I was reading stories on Reddit. Then I remembered the 3 sports cars when I was young. All too much of a coincidence to me. I tried looking it up once to see if there was a group or something known for driving the same car in different colors, but as expected, I found nothing. I'm writing this to share my experience, but also because I'm genuinely curious. Does anyone have a similar experience? Maybe it's a stretch, but it is a strange coincidence. I know I don't want to meet those cars again.